on? Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, Tim. So welcome, thank you for coming tonight. I'm Marshall McCarthy, and my husband and I, Tim, started the group over 20 years ago. I think many of you are familiar with who we are and what we do, but we've been having conversations about what makes life meaningful for a long time now with some of these members, and some of them have come over the last few years. And we're excited tonight to talk about capitalism as religion. We'll get into that in a minute. I'd first just like everyone to introduce themselves on the panel. So if you could just share who you are and what religious organization you represent.
I'm Tim Selby. I'm from here at the heart of Steamboat.
Okay.
And I'm Tim Olmstead, and I'm with the Buddhist community in town.
I'm Karen Post, and I lead the local A Course in Miracles group.
I'm Jesse Ophoff. I'm with the United Church of Christ and currently lead the Congregational Church.
I'm Rabbi Colby from Har Mishpacha, the Jewish congregation of Steamboat.
And I am Jeremy Lucas, who is the Episcopal priest at St. Paul's Episcopal Church.
Thank you. So, as we said, tonight's topic is capitalism as religion. And we realized this was kind of a provocative title. And we did it intentionally because a lot of our conversations in these last few months have been about that now, a lot less people are part of religions and going to church and things like that. And has religion been replaced by capitalism? And is that what we hold most dear in this country, is making money? And there may, some people might argue that has become what people in our culture and society worship and put on their altar. And so that's what we'll be exploring tonight. And just to give a picture of what this could look like, capitalism as religion, we were playing around with some of these ideas that the sacred texts could be like market reports, the Dow Jones, that the high holidays are shopping days like Black Friday, and that all of our religious holidays have actually become shopping holidays. It's become about Christmas, there's sales, there's Memorial Day sales. So we've taken, and Easter is about consumerism and buying things, candy. Mother's Day, buy them something. So that most of our holidays now are around consuming in some kind of way, and that the religious leaders or the saints are either economists or bankers. We look up to billionaires. They have a lot of power in our culture, people who have money. Places of worship being shopping centers, stock exchanges, banks, that we have these rituals of buying and selling things, that our faith is now in growth and progress, and that the market will, as long as it keeps growing, that things will be okay. This belief in that, just growing and making more money is at the highest value. And that our salvation is, again, in that idea that growth and technology will solve all of our problems. So anyway, there's a little picture of what the similarities between how religion functions and how capitalism may be functioning as a religion already in our culture today. And so tonight what we want to do is just explore some of these ideas. We're going to be talking about money, wealth, generosity, and how we can be in relationship to these things. I mean, obviously we all live in a capitalistic culture, so how can we best do that with some guidance from our religious leaders? So the first question we'll start with is just, what are the values in your tradition that inform your view on money or relationship to money? Who would like to start?
I just missed the question, so go ahead.
Okay.
That was a setup.
If you walk out right when I ask the question, you have to answer first.
So, Judaism gets a lot of, and we explored this together, there are a lot of actually anti-Semitic tropes that have developed over time around Jews and money. Raise your hand if you've ever heard the term Jewing someone down in terms of them being cheap or those types of things. And we also hear all of these conspiracy theories around Jews controlling one industry or the other or all of them. And so that's kind of the sad truth of the fact that Jews over time have become the scapegoats for many, many different populations and people that use us as the scapegoat for hate. But actually, in our tradition, there are many values that are actually quite positive around money that many of us Jewish people, we embrace fully into our lives, or at least we seek to. So obviously, we as Jews, we value education, which could be a reason why there are many successful Jews in the world. There is a huge emphasis placed on education from our tradition. Also generosity, philanthropy. This might explain why there are many Jews that we know of that do become very wealthy, but they give away a lot of their money. The good ones. They give away a lot of their money to charity. And that comes back to the main foundational value related to money in Judaism, which is called tzedakah. It comes from the root of the word tzedek, tzadik, daled, kuf, which means righteous. And this is righteous giving in terms of money, in terms of time, in terms of talent. These are the ways that we as Jews, that we give back to the community. So the way that it plays out, unfortunately, is these stereotypes and conspiracy theories, but at our core, we have many, many different texts and values that point for us to have a healthy relationship with money.
I think someone. Yeah.
What do you handed me the microphone?
He's gonna try to get out of it now.
I know, because this was a topic that I actually brought up to talk about. So they're all like, you talk about it. So in the Christian tradition, there is quite a lot of conversation around money. Jesus talks about money almost more than he talks about anything else. He talks about wealth, he talks about rich folks, he talks about giving away all that you have. And so in that kind of baseline, not to say that money is bad, but that money can corrupt people in a pretty deep way. That's sort of where Christian tradition starts. It is, if you're not paying attention to what is happening around money, it does become your religion. You can't serve God in wealth. Like, that's just right there in the words of Jesus. So Jesus doesn't have a lot of really positive things to say about rich people. He doesn't have a lot of very positive things to say about how people get their money, which is also part of the problem. Having the money isn't necessarily the issue. It's how you get the money that is part of the problem. If you hurt people all along the line and are unethical and steal and take a lot of money and you have it, well, that's a problem. It doesn't matter just that you have it, how you get it is part of the issue as well. And then what you do with it when you have it is a really much bigger point. And that is really, we're called to be generous and to give that money away to help the poor. Not just give it away for any reason, really it is intentionally to help other people. There's a lot of, a philosophy in the world right now that if you are rich, you are smart. And if you were rich, you are good. Because if you wouldn't be rich and God wouldn't have given you all that money if you hadn't have been smart and good, right? And then the alternative of that is that we look at poor people as stupid and we look at them as having some type of moral failure. So money, in terms of having it or not having it, becomes this moral issue of, you're a good person because you have a lot, and you're not a great person if you don't have a lot. Well, I know and you know that just because you're rich doesn't mean you're smart. You can have a lot of money and still not be a smart person and still not be a good person. Just because you're poor does not mean that you're stupid. It does not mean that you don't have things to share with the world and you can do a lot with that. So there's a pretty strong feeling in Christianity that money can corrupt the soul and that you have to pay close attention to that, and that giving away what you have is a very high virtue. You know, most saints, most people that you see who are held up as paragons of early Christianity, they were all very poor. You know, most of the orders, the religious orders that started, they took vows of poverty, right? So that's sort of the baseline from where I think Christianity starts. I would defer to others who might have more to add about that. Tim or whoever wants to say something.
That sounded good.
That's it. Is that okay? I did my best to represent all of Christianity.
This is, so from the course's point of view, it doesn't judge, nor, you know, and so it's not judging against money or against poverty. But what it talks about is, what do you put on your altar? What is the most important thing to you? And if we put anything other than our connection to each other and to God on the altar, then we're losing connection to ourselves, we're losing our connection to God. And so in any kind of materialism, what it talks about is that when we make money, the thing that we think will bring us safety, will bring us esteem, what we start to do is compare. We get caught in judgment. We get caught in comparison. Do I have as much as that person? Do I have less? Does that make me, you know, safer, less safe? And I think we all know, you know, people who have quite a lot of money. I grew up around those, and they didn't have a sense of safety. I said once that my father used to call them the needy affluent. Because no matter how much you have, it seems like you don't have enough. You're, you know, one investment away from disaster or something. And so what the Course talks about is that there's nothing at a material level that will give us a sense of having made it, of being safe. And if we put those things on our altar, and it doesn't call it bad or anything else, but if that becomes our central focus, we are in competition with each other. We see other people as potentially having more of a scarce resource than we do. And thus it brings more sense of separation and isolation and less of a sense of being within community.
Yeah, in the Buddhist tradition, there's really no discussion about whether money is good and bad in and of itself. The question is our relationship to money, fairly obviously, I guess. And, you know, it's interesting, I spent many years living in Nepal, around Nepali people and Tibetan refugees and people who, you know, just generally are very, very poor. And I never, ever once heard the discussion about resentment around wealthy people. It's not in the culture, it's just not there. So we don't demonize money. Money is just what we call a dharma of the world. In other words, it's a natural truth. And wealth, it's just a natural thing that we have to deal with. So, you know, we would say that money, that when we have wealth, there's a natural happiness, a kind of wholesome happiness, that we're okay, that gives us an opportunity to share it. Not give it all away. That would be probably considered to be an extreme, unless you take monk's vows or nun's vows. That would be considered to be an exaggeration. But it allows us to be generous, and giving away money and material things is just one aspect of generosity. It will also that we enjoy the fact that we have wealth based on what we call right livelihood. In other words, it wasn't based on crime, killing, producing alcohol, etc. The very obvious things. And that also that money gives us happiness if we're not in debt. That it gives us a natural kind of happiness, a wholesome kind of happiness, a sort of ease. So for the most part, money is not looked at as evil, but when, of course, we get attached to it, anything becomes a source of evil and tremendous suffering and distress. So there's much more to say about it, but we don't go in Buddhist countries. Now, Buddhists in the West, I think, sometimes can mix up their Christian extreme view with the Buddhist extreme view and become extremist. But that would be considered to be actually a wrong view. Again, the view is called the middle way. It's not extreme one way or another. This is the main point.
Tim, talk about there's not a resentment from people to people who have more wealth or that kind of thing. What do you think contributes to that being the case, where it's not the case in some other places?
I don't know. It's so interesting. There's no. I'm not given to exaggeration, but there's no stigma on not being poor, because everybody's poor, and seeing poor people, and they all have tremendous dignity. One of the things I remember about being in Nepal is even the poorest people, if they have a pair of pants, they would iron. They kept their spirit up. It was so beautiful. I was always impressed. Yeah.
The other thing, and it goes back to what Jeremy was talking about, and I don't know in Nepal, but I remember what hit me when I was in Greece was you saw this middle-class home right next to this almost palace. It was so beautiful, next to a shack. And it was very clear that there were no enclaves of the wealthy and slums. Everybody was living together. So they weren't deciding you're dangerous because you're poor or whatever. And it was so incredible to see that, again, it wasn't seen as you're dumb or you're lazy or you're bad or you're good if you have a lot. It was all mixed. So that wasn't used to delineate society.
For our panelists, could you hold the mic just a titch further from your mouth?
Okay.
We've got some echoing for that. That's it, thanks.
Well, the reason I let Jeremy go first of the Christian ministers up here is because there's so many different strains and ways that you can take the question, how do we take the things that Jesus said about money that were a lot and turn them into things that we can use in the real world? And you have several different ways of doing that. So one of them is like a monastic approach that takes very seriously the way that Jesus and John the Baptist and others were like, yeah, private property isn't a real thing. It all comes from God and it's for all of us. So if you have more than enough and your neighbor has less than enough, you're committing theft and you should fix the crime that you're committing. So that's one approach. Most people don't opt for that. More common in our setting is something born out of the Puritan era that says, okay, how do we look at giving and like make a rule that normal people can follow that will help them remain generous? Which is where we usually find tithing, right? Like you should, about 10% of your income, you should hold very loosely or actively give away. But then we also have other strains outside of North American and white Christianity, especially in Latin American and African Christianity, of liberation theology that says actually the structures that we've made to make money and move money keep some people stuck where they are and truly not free in a meaningful sense. And even though the goal of Christianity isn't for everyone to be economically independent, there are some things that it's really hard to achieve if you're not economically independent, right? Like money can't buy happiness, but knowing you can pay to go to the doctor goes a long way towards stable mental health. So these things are interconnected. Human flourishing can't just happen apart from the economic question. So whether it's what Jesus expects from each of us or what Jesus expects from all of us, I think there's really never a time that we're not trying to bridge the gap between what Jesus said that we feel completely up to fulfilling and what we can actually accomplish and expect from each other.
Yeah, thank you. A number of different perspectives on that. So when we think about capitalism, and I don't know, maybe this is just me, but some of the values of capitalism are basically to make money at all costs. Like that's what corporations are designed to do, and often to the detriment of maybe the people that work there or the people that live near the company or corporation, certainly the environment. And so I'm just curious, like how the values of capitalism might square with your faith or not. And then maybe the follow-up to that is, how do we live in a capitalist society in like right relationship to money? Maybe those are two different, but.
Or three different questions? Like one question is, how does it square with your faith? One is another is, how is it not? And then another is, well, what do you do about that?
Okay, so whatever, however you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not answering all three.
Okay, start, how about just the first one?
I'm just gonna go with, from my perspective, capitalism is an inherently individualistic and selfish point of how things work. You're meant to think about yourself, you think about what is best for you, and the theory goes, if everybody is thinking about what is best for them, then everything's just gonna work out. Like, we're all gonna be fine. We have, in our particular country, a legal understanding of corporations as people, right? They're considered people under the law. So they can sue, they can do all kinds of different things that people can do. The problem with that is that those particular people almost have to be sociopathic in their desire to make money, because fiduciary responsibilities for corporations are to make money. To the stockholders, to the shareholders, is to make money. And it's not to consider like all the other things. It is to increase the return on investment. So in my particular point of view, I think that that is a particularly selfish and individualistic, inward-looking way of seeing the world. Christianity is not that. It is a way of looking at the world that looks out and looks at what might be better for everyone rather than just for myself. We're meant to pay attention to other things happening in the world. So if a corporation can make money by dumping hazardous liquids into a river, that's not seen as anything problematic. I mean, maybe with the EPA that we used to have, or some other things like that, maybe. But particularly, it's seen as if it costs less to do that, okay, fine. Well, a Christian person, I don't think, would go and pour their hazardous waste in their neighbor's, pool. Just because it was cheaper than taking it down and having it recycled, you wouldn't want to do that. That's not how you build community. And so I think there's a real difference between the individualism of corporations and the community that is meant to be built as in the Christian faith. That's my answer for one question.
So I'm no economist, but Jeremy, isn't there a distinction between capitalism and the way capitalism is being contorted now? Because, for instance, what you were saying about the return to the investor at all costs, this is a relatively new phenomenon. I mean, really just in the last 20, 30 years. So I don't know if we're talking about the evils of greed that would be true anytime and anywhere, and that's an important question to have. Or were we trying to come up with a sort of ideal economic system that does require the amassing of wealth for research and development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and hopefully without, utterly greedy people at the top. So it might be two questions. I mean, the first question is the issue of our relationship with money, our relationship with our community, our relationship with the environment, et cetera, et cetera. Our relation with the fact that what's happened for various reasons in modern society is that we've become impoverished personally, spiritually, and that we're looking towards money to heal that. But that's not exactly the same problem, I would suggest.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So in that, I think in the history of what we consider capitalism, like things have changed over the last couple hundred years. But starting around 1600, we start to see the sort of system we have now that focuses on wealth generation as progress. And in that frame, it also has a lot to say about what has value and what doesn't. And to me, this is one of the areas where it really starts making a Venn diagram with religion. Like what has value and what doesn't. So in a traditional frame of Christianity, all things have value because all things were created by God. The earth is sacred and everything on it, and people have a special kind of value being made in the image of God. And you can't change that, and you can't make it more, and you can't make it less. Whereas in the capitalist frame, when the question is, what am I going to do with this to give it value? What can I do to it so that now it has worth that it didn't have before? You have to take what it is and not just say this has value. You have to put it through a process that generates wealth for an individual. So the Yampa River, for example, does not have worth already in a capitalist frame. It has worth once you water a field with it, turn it into agriculture, once you turn it into tourism, once you put it through a meter into people's homes. Once you can translate waters into dollars, then water has worth. But before that, it was just stuff. And traditionally, Christianity doesn't have a category for just stuffness. Creation is sacred. But we do the same thing to people, right? A person's net worth, we kind of understand that that doesn't have anything to do with how much they're worth, but we also kind of don't, because if you tell people we're going to tax the rich, and people go, oh no, but then the rich will leave. Well, that matters because the rich are worth something. Even if they don't pay taxes, they're worth something, even if they're not paying to the system. And so we're terrified to make them leave. But if you said, well, we should tax the poor, no one's going to say, oh, well, that might mean they leave. We might have fewer of them. Because essentially they already don't have worth. It doesn't bother anyone that they leave. So we do use these categories of worth that are economic to redefine things that have been traditionally defined by other religious spaces. Now, I did work really hard to try to find a positive thing. And everyone who's had these conversations with me over the last months, I want you to be really proud of me because I tried so hard. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay. So the thing that I think actually does work is this idea that where there is a perceived lack, someone can imagine it differently and convince someone else to invest, and together you can make up for that lack. So I think of Jesus feeding the 5,000. The disciples look at 5,000 people plus and go, there is not enough food for these people. And Jesus says, that's funny you should say that because I envision them all being fed and you doing it. And then a little boy comes forward with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread and is like, what about this? And he's invested, he's putting capital investment into Jesus' vision of there being enough. And with that, actually there is. That is the closest thing. That is not a capitalist story. It is a communist story, if anything, of people sharing and bringing everything to the table. But I tried so hard to find a story with Jesus that reminded me of capitalism. And I think it's just the combination of imagination and calling for the investment of others that actually can do net good things?
I'll just add a couple more positive. Good job. So I think, I mean, obviously, you know, there are positive things about the world that we're living in, and I think in general, to be Jewish is to always find that positivity and to find the silver lining. That's inherently Jewish. And I think that this individualism that we have grown accustomed to has many things that can, with the right intention, with the right preparation, with the right, with the right honesty and clarity, can actually be used in a Jewish context for good. So I mentioned earlier about tzedakah. This is like a huge pillar of what it means to be Jewish. No matter how much we have or no matter how much we don't have, we always have to find room to give tzedakah, to give charity, to give our time, our talents, and our treasure away to those who need it. And so realistically, the more that you have, the more you have to give, right? And so ideally, if somebody were to take capitalism very seriously and work really hard to get to the top of their industry and make lots and lots of money, from a Jewish standpoint, they would have more money to give away. Also, like free market capitalism, like healthy competition, right? Excellence is something I think across the table is something that is really important also in Judaism. And so having that healthy sense of like, well, I want to be the best tailor on this block, right? Or, but also that competition making us better and having that free market. I will say that the caveats, in order to make it positive in this day and age, is always being aware of privilege and recognizing, and this is very Jewish, especially in a modern context, always realizing we as Jews, we hold really close that we always remember that we were once slaves in the land of Egypt. And no matter how successful we are, no matter how many things that we have in this lifetime, our ancestors were slaves in the land of Egypt, and so we should always view the other, whoever that is, in any given moment, as needing of attention, of love, and of tzedakah, of our time and our treasure and our talents. And then the other big caveat is exactly what somebody was talking about not owning land. Was that you, Jesse? So also in Judaism, it is the same text, right? But when, back in the day, thousands of years ago, the way that people accumulated wealth after we were nomadic and wanderers, once we got our own land and separated out into tribes, the way that somebody was wealthy or accumulated wealth was all about land. But just like in Christianity, and I imagine other traditions, it was never a sense of ownership, like this is mine, right? It's always a sense of like, this is mine for a while, but I'm actually like leasing it from God, right? And so obviously nowadays people stray from that a bit, but ideally we would keep that at the front of our hearts that, yeah, in this lifetime or maybe for the next few years, this is ours, but it really belongs to God. So those are the two caveats.
In the Buddhist tradition, we don't have the what can I say, the cosmic banker. We don't have the idea that someone has given us something and therefore we then are compelled to do this or that with it. Basically the first of the what we call the six perfections. The first is the perfection of generosity. But there's several kinds of generosity. There's the material generosity is the first, most obvious. Then we talk about the generosity of offering protection to people who are afraid and upset. And then the third is the generosity of offering spiritual teachings. But it would, in our tradition, if we were told this is how much you have to give away, it wouldn't be generosity. It would be following someone else's rule. So that would be antithetical to generosity, frankly. And we think generosity is actually, we say it's the stairway to the higher realms, which is a way of saying generosity gets you to heaven. But the Buddha said that the real issue, the real virtue, the real goal is contentment. He said the greatest wealth is contentment. And beyond that, generosity is just wealth is just an agreed upon, as someone said, a dollar bill has no inherent value other than what's agreed upon in the community. And then it goes from there. And the rest has to do with the development of our moral character and our willingness to share and take care of each other without going to an extreme. In other words, we would say, again, it might be fine for a monk or a nun or an ascetic to give away everything, but someone has to make up for that. Someone has got to feed them. So it's a zero-sum game. There are good reasons spiritually, I think, to go through periods of asceticism, but that's, a response to the evils of capitalism is not one of them.
Yeah, Joseph.
I want to jump back just to where Jeremy started out for a minute. I think Jesus is, as he nicely described, it's very challenging around issues of money and wealth. And I think in places like ours, where we are here in most of our lives, I think we kind of want to avoid that a little bit because it's kind of uncomfortable, it's difficult, it's challenging, and it's something that I always think of as a very a challenging piece for all of us. I read a piece one time where a pastor said to his congregation, next Sunday I want everybody to bring their tax returns because we're going to, as a community, we're going to look at what everybody makes and what everybody gives. And you think, like, that's insane, right? Like, I don't know if it was an actual story or if it really happened or if
Was it Jeremy's?
or if people did.
The person doesn't have a job anymore. I work in a Christian church anymore.
Right. But the thing that, we would all kind of, but, in community, in faith community, I mean, we do confession, right? And we talk about our grief, and we talk about our fear, we talk about our anxiety, we talk about everything in our heart and soul. And he says, well, let's come and openly talk about our money. And you're like, no way. What does that say about it? You think of capitalism as religion. What is your sacred cow? What is that thing that's, hey, that's my thing, none of your business. It's not a part of community. It's just me and mine, and I don't want to talk about it. That says something about what we do with money in our lives. I don't have some kind of answer to that. And I don't want everybody to bring their tax returns, but that says something about that, what that means. I thought you did a good job at the beginning talking about the holiday, the way we make this, and all those things that Jesus talked about money. I don't know what the ancient Roman system of economics was. It wasn't capitalism, right? But I don't know what it was. But he's talking about the exact same thing. So I think capitalism kind of can be. This runs through there's lots of different economic systems. It's about the heart and what we value and what's important and where we find meaning and purpose and what matters to us and what we do with it. So I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a discomforting thing at some level, I think, for a lot of us.
Yeah.
I was just going to make a comment to what Tim said. I like what you said about the generosity. Because of course, the Course doesn't talk about money directly at all, unlike, the Bible or anything else. But as you were talking, I sort of thought about like an apple tree, and if we talk about money, the apple tree is not giving back sunshine and water, which is what it takes in. And it grows, it holds that stuff, the nutrients from the ground, the water, the air. It just transforms it into something else that's natural for it to give. And I think from the Course's point of view, all of its energy and growing and becoming, there's nothing wrong with any of that. You know, something that I have said about the course in other meetings, though, is it's very clear that we mix up winning and losing. And the course says what we tend to see as our biggest victories are actually our biggest losses. And what we often perceive as our biggest losses are our biggest victories. And what it's talking about is that when we perceive we've won, we've had a victory, we give ourselves credit. And that's feeding our own egos. And when we're in a time of loss, we've lost somebody that we care about, we're having a struggle, that's when we reach out, we ask for help, we pray, we recognize, that we can't do it all alone, and we surrender. And there is the victory, because we allow things to come to us, and we gain a strength, and then we help somebody else. And so it's this cycle of receiving and giving, and from the course's point of view, thinking that way, even in the energy of getting money, and to live in gratitude that I didn't do this all myself, that generosity becomes a natural extension. And it doesn't have to be, I got $10, so I gave $1. I grew up with the idea of tithing, but it wasn't religious. It wasn't a religious idea, and it wasn't necessarily just a percentage. But my father always said, the world's given you this, our country's given you, you're gonna pay taxes, but you also want to do something that extends what you see as a part of your gratitude back out. And so when I was in college, that was volunteering for Special Olympics. And I didn't have money to give, but I had time to give, I had energy. And so it's like that apple tree. You take stuff in, you recognize, and in an act of gratitude, you extend it back out.
Yeah, it seems to me that one of the things you're suggesting there is the issue is not money, it's our relationship to money. And clearly, if someone has a wrong relationship with money, they're greedy, they hoard it at the expense of others. They create legal systems and taxation systems where the rich pay the least. Of course, that is totally contorted. I guess that's maybe in a Christian term, a sin. We don't use that same language. But we would say clearly that's a misunderstanding. It's a wrong relationship with money. But money itself, is just like a building brick. You can do anything with it. But if you hoard it and we lose relationship, clearly it's amoral. It leads to unhappiness for oneself, unhappiness from others. I think we would all agree with that, clearly.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I guess maybe we could just get into then this question of generosity, because in some faiths, it is just required, like 10% of your income that you donate. In others, it's just like you were saying, Tim, more open or general or about relationship. But I'm just curious for your particular faiths, how you talk about generosity or handle the idea of tithing in your church. And again, and just to tie it back to capitalism, maybe how that might be tied to, I think taxes in this country are also that idea of you give into a system to then share with everyone else. Like, do you see that as a similar dynamic within your churches or congregations?
Go
ahead.
I'm just gonna wait to see if anybody else is gonna say. In a capitalist system, every individual gets to choose whether they are generous or not. That is really the long and short of it is. If you have $1 billion, you are not required to be generous to anybody. In fact, you don't pay many taxes either into a system. You probably have lots of ways to avoid paying into that system at all. A few years ago, Warren Buffett started this group of billionaires that had all signed this agreement to give away all of their wealth in their lifetime. Like, give it all away. Be very generous. And a lot of billionaires signed on to this agreement. Well, just about a month ago in the New York Times, there was an entire article about how a lot of AI billionaires now are trying to talk people into taking their names off of that list. And the reason they're doing that is because they're saying you shouldn't give your money to just a bunch of people here to spend it. You should be investing your money in places that will make you more money so that you can give away more money. All right. So when I was pretty young as a priest, I didn't really have any money to invest in anything, but I had an investment banker who was a part of the congregation. And I was talking about ethical investment. And he said something along the lines of, you let me worry about what makes you money, and then you go and you give away that money. It seems reasonable, right? That I would get to choose how my money got used after it was invested and made more money, right? That makes sense. But if he invests that money in building bombs that kill children, then I don't think that's the greatest way that I want my money being spent or making money off of that. I mean, the military industrial complex makes more people more money. Almost every retirement account everywhere, anywhere is invested in killing. It just is. I don't have a lot of good things to say about capitalism. I'll say that. What I encourage people to do is, because I feel like we have to live in the world that we have, is to give away to the point that makes them uncomfortable. Don't give away just what you have left over at the end when you have taken care of yourself and the next 7 generations of your family. I think you should start now and give away till it makes you uncomfortable. I don't believe that there should be any trillionaires in the world. I don't really believe that there should be any billionaires in the world. I'm way over here when it comes to this. And the reason I am is because I don't think that there are enough people counterbalancing the greed of capitalism to the point to say, hey, we can do it another way. We can do it we can make other choices. We believe somehow that capitalism is just a foregone conclusion. This is the best thing, right? Because we're doing it. It must be the right way to do it. Well, there are a lot of other ways to do it. You know, we could let one person make $1 trillion and decide how they're going to spend that money, or we could give every child in the whole country health insurance. We could pay for everybody's health insurance for many years to do that. But we, because we're in this system, allow the accumulation of wealth in such a way that there will always be those who have and those who do not have. I think it's very telling that most people in most jobs right now are called human resources. If you think about what that means, you are a bag of bones and blood that is meant to be a resource for someone else to make money. Do you make yourself a little bit of money? Sure. Do you make yourself enough to live? Yes. You're making somebody else a lot more money. So I don't know that we can tell people that they have to give it away, but I do.
Jeremy, we would say that if you told somebody that they had to give it away and they did it, that's obedience. That's not generosity.
Sure.
And second of all, in order to be able to give all those kids healthcare or whatever, there has to be an accumulation of wealth somehow. So I think what's happened is the accumulation of wealth in the tax system has gone haywire. I don't think it's about money itself.
Sure.
Or the aggregation of money.
I don't think there has to be individual accumulation of wealth to give children, health insurance.
But somehow, through taxes, that money has to.
Sure, that's a communitarian decision. That's a lot of people having their hand in the choices that are made and the decisions that are made.
That's an economic system.
It is, but it's not pure capitalism.
Maybe not. No, maybe not.
I think that's the choice.
I will fib on us a little bit. About 10 years ago, I brought up the question with this group. Not everyone. I wasn't. Some of the same folks. And it was really a great. And I said, look, when you go to Denver now and you stop at a stop sign, there's people panhandling your car. And it can be very, very uncomfortable. I said, okay, from your tradition, Like, how does your tradition inform what you would do? And I think there was like 8 of us in the room, and there was absolutely no agreement about what to do. Everybody had a completely different thing. Of course, there was the ones who said, oh, I'm not gonna give money because he's just gonna go to the liquor store right over there and buy liquor. So he's better. It was really fascinating. So this not to say that we all got it wrong, but I'm saying that there's as many approaches as there are people, I think.
I think related to this question about our own communities, it was actually really fascinating when we got to this during our conversation, because here we are, a bunch of religious leaders, and while I think we would all love to be doing what we do as professions and not have to ask people for money in order to keep the lights on and to pay our salaries and to do all of those things, it's just simply not possible in many cases. And the fact of the matter is that faith and religion and most religious institutions are also businesses, right? We're nonprofits, and so we're not in it to, make more money than we need. But we talked very honestly about some of these awkward moments in some of our day-to-day lives where we walk with people through really, really difficult moments, death, sickness, and sometimes, depending on the circumstance, there might be conversations with that person or loved ones about the actual cost or value of the services that we bring. And so our congregation, we work on a membership model. Of course, everybody should feel like no matter if they can pay $1 or $10,000 to the synagogue, they will be welcomed with open arms. But there is something, I must say, to contributing something to things that we value. And hopefully a huge part of the job, my job, is to allow people to understand that what our community brings to lives has value and needs to be prioritized in some way in our congregation members' lives. And that's really tricky and really difficult and requires, like Tim says, that we talk openly, sometimes, separating out the business and the God, right? But also figuring out the times where they intersect. And, these events are one of our only times to speak vulnerably and to ask, on behalf of religious leaders for you all to think about these things. And on this topic, I would say that's one thing that I would love for you all to think about. Like, what do you value in terms of your faith tradition or your religious community? And how do you show that you value that? It's not always with money. Yes, that's important in order so that we keep our jobs and we can maintain and keep this beautiful building. But also, how can you put in time and talents to your community? And it's the whole package, right? And that's important.
So I think when we talk about generosity, when we talk about Jesus and the earliest communities of people that tried to put his teaching into practice, the question was often, what can you do to make the world that God wants, that Caesar is never going to give you? And what Jesus talked about as the kingdom of God, this reality of divine goodness that would come and change everything. What are you going to do to change the way the world works, knowing in your very bones that Rome does not give a cluck about you, right? So we're talking about Jewish groups living in occupied land who, when they ask Jesus, should we pay taxes, were asking, is it in line with Torah for us to send money that actually results in our own oppression? Like, I don't want to be in this, but I also don't want to get murdered. So, like, do I uphold the system, or do I try to opt out and start a revolution and get the temple destroyed? Like, these are real life and death questions. And the answer that communities in Acts of the Apostles, the earliest records we have of communities forming, and in other first and second century texts like the Didache, are what we want. Like, sure, pay your taxes, but know in your bones that when you pay your taxes, it's going to be unjust and it's going to hurt everyone and it's bad. Like, it's not going to help you. But you have money after taxes, and that money, you have the power to build a little bit of the world that you want to see come now. So, for example, Acts chapter 2, all of the people in the community gave everything, gave up the idea of private ownership, handed it over to the church. The church appoints a special council of people who are skilled at this kind of thing to redistribute it to people according to their needs. So there is no private property, and there is no poverty in moments. Probably it didn't happen quite that smoothly, but that's the storytelling, right? And that storytelling matters. The exception to that is one story where people said, yeah, no, we're all in, and then they held back half of it, and then the Holy Spirit struck them dead. So, like, it's not ideal.
That's a challenging story for stewardship.
Yeah, it's not the story you share in November, December. Right. You want people to have the fuzzies about giving and not think the Holy Spirit will strike you dead if you tell us how you did it. You leave that story out come November, December. I'm sure lectionaries put that in May. Like, they do, for just that purpose. But, like, even later than that, even, you know, when you get past these sort of idealized scripturized texts that are maybe pie in the sky for what actually happened, a text like the Didache, that is this very nitty-gritty guide for how to make a Christian community, says if anyone has need, everyone in the church skips lunch, and all the money you would have spent on lunch, you give it all to that person, and then they won't have that need anymore. And that's the kind of offering you take up when everyone in your community is poor. You don't take up that kind of offering when one person is a benefactor that can fix it. You take up that kind of thing when you know that it is unjust for someone in your community to go hungry, when the community can fix it, and that Rome is not going to fix these problems for you. It is up to you and the power that you have to fix them now. So the question of, like, generosity in Christianity is, there's a part of it that's, like, I would say for us hyper-spiritualized, like it's about your own journey and your ability to follow Jesus because you see money as meh as he did. Like, people are like, hey, here's money, and he's like, meh. But there's another piece that's like, actually, if you have money, you have power. And even if it's 2 cents, you have 2 cents of power to see what you want to happen in the world happen today. So there's that.
Thanks, Jess. Okay, I want to open it up to questions. And also, I forgot to mention our people online. Thanks for joining us online. If you have questions, you can put it in the comments, and Katie's in the room and can ask your question. But do we have anyone in person? Actually, let's use that. He has a question. You got to hand it an answer. Can you use the mic?
Subaru. Let's talk about Subaru for a while. They sell us cars, and then they give tons of money to charity, and they advertise that a lot. And my question to you is, what makes you, this group, think that your churches and synagogues are any different from large corporations? You offer people something, and in return, you want money from them. And the money, some of it you give away, some of it you build buildings. What makes you so sure that you are not corporations.
Well, Subaru's the big church in Steamboat, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, personally, I don't get a cent for what I do, nor ask for any money.
I mean, I think what Rabbi Colby said was really good in that all of our organizations are businesses, but that's only because that's the only model we have in the way our society is structured, right? Before this model, churches were other things that weren't businesses. But right now, every one of our organizations is a kind of business. And in a way, it's not different because people pay for a service that they want to see in the world. I'd say the main thing, and sometimes I don't have faith that we're that different. Like, it really depends on the day. But I think the primary difference is that what you have to pay to be in the community is whatever works for you. And what you get out of the community is all of it. Which is not, like, I can't go to Subaru and be like, hey, I have $5. And they'd be like, great, here's a brand new Subaru. They'd be like, no, a Subaru costs this much. And if you don't have that money, you don't get it.
You get a Subaru for $20,000.
Right, but I am not in the next 10 years going to have $20,000 in my bank account. So like, I'm not gonna get a Subaru. That's like outside of my realm, right? But belonging to these organizations is never outside of anybody's realm.
This is not about how much money you make, it's about the model that you all of you are doing.
I want to jump on that.
It's simple. We provide services, and you give us money, you tithe, or you donate, or whatever. You don't see a big difference.
I love your question, Larry, because like I wrestle with that a good deal. Like speaking about the Christian world, Christianity in America is big business.
Huge.
And when we do like sort of church leadership stuff and all that kind of thing, half the time I'm thinking, man, this is just business, you know. And it's very capitalistic in a sense. It's about more money, more people, and more buildings, and more programs, and more. It's all success is all based on more. And you're always thinking like, that's not what we're about, right? That's not why we're doing this. And it's tricky because it's like those things matter because if you have less money and less people and less things, and less work, like what you're doing loses its like power in a way too. So it's always this sort of balance, and I wrestle with that question. And I think for me, where I kind of come with that, ultimately, there's a lot of that component to it for sure. For me, just personally, I have to do it not for that, and not for capitalistic success or for my ego or whatever, for a deeper purpose and what it means in the world. And I feel like, you know, just speaking of our, you know, congregation, I feel like what we do together as community matters in this world. And that's why we do it. And it's imperfect and it's a lot of things. But I feel like the world is better because we're doing it together.
And why is that any different than a corporation? Why is that
Because
any
I
different?
don't charge anybody to come to church.
But you collect money.
If people want to give, yes, but Subaru doesn't collect money until you give it to them for a car. Somebody can walk into the church, hold on, Larry, somebody can walk into the church, never donate 1 penny, and they're never asked to leave. And they get everything from the church that the community has to give. This is what Jesse was saying, is that Subaru only operates on you get what we have when you give us money. The church does not operate on that premise. Does it need money? Yes. Does it have money? Yes. Is it a nonprofit corporation? Absolutely. But nobody stands at the door and says it's $20 to come in. You can't have communion unless you give us 50. You can't talk to anybody else and come to coffee hour unless you give us 100. Like, those are very different models. You don't have to pay to come to church. That's, I think, the biggest difference.
I'm gonna not be apologetic here, and, because I know I love Larry.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna lean, Larry, I'm gonna lean in here. Yeah, sure, we're a business, we're a corporation, we're whoever you wanna call it. And guess what, Larry, our product that we are dishing out, kind of similar to what Tim was saying, is the best darn Subaru that you would ever drive, right? Like, we are changing the world here. We're doing like big God's work. We're making people better people in the
Do you
world.
see this group of people?
And guess what? Okay, fine. Like, I'm a car salesman. I don't know. But all I'm saying is that,
That's lots of money to charity.
yeah,
Okay.
okay, it's all right. I think you catch my drift, that we do deliver a product. We are a business. And yet, it's something of value that if we want it in the world, which I think that I speak for all of us, that we do, we need better people in this world, especially today. And so that's gonna cost some money. And sometimes the more wealthy people can cover those that need more help. And yeah, I'm a car salesman, I
I
guess.
think that would be.
Okay, so let's go to the next question, Darcy. Yeah, Tim, do you mind?
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit the concept of poverty mind? And is there any element of poverty mind that we actually see that's maybe similar to what's building this Christian capitalistic notion?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of impoverished mind is just the idea there, the sense that no matter what we have, we don't appreciate it. That there's always this perception of the world that we need more. It's actually personified there. I mean, we have pictures of sort of demons. We call them hungry ghosts. They have big tummies, so they have a big appetite and long, skinny necks. And so with nothing, they can never get enough down their neck. And so there's this constant hunger. So in some ways, we say that realm, that way of living, is an actual way of being reborn. But that's a kind of a objective, but more it's a psychological style. And we know those people, and no matter what they have, it's never enough. And then so we say that there's 6 sort of psychological realms that we can be reborn in, and that's called the realm of the hungry ghosts. Yeah. And that's, by the way, that's a karmic consequence of greed. So, we do scare the hell out of people. We actually say that there's a place you're going to be reborn where whatever you're going through right now is all you're going to see. All you're going to see is a world that you don't have enough of, and everybody else has plenty of, and it will burn you. This is a particular kind of hell. But these are psychological, most of us would say, they're psychological descriptions of psycho-emotional states.
So it's like the perception becomes the reality.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we have, when people are, burning up with anger, that's their predominant thing. They're born in what we call the hell realm. There's actually 12 hell realms. When their thing is greed, they're born in the realm of the hungry ghosts. When their thing is sort of ignorance, they're born in the animal realm. That's the only one of the 2 realms that are actually incarnate with animals. Then with us, humans, we have a balance of a sort of, anyway, with good karma, we're born as a human, and then some are born in what we call the realm of the jealous gods, where they have a lot, but they always want more. So a place like Steamboat would be kind of a jealous god place. And then we have a place like the God realm, where people are just so satisfied with their own specialness, and they just, they have flowers everywhere, and they, do yoga all day and everything. But the very interesting is the last thing. The interesting thing about this is it's constantly moving. Nothing is permanent Buddhism. So the interesting thing about the God realm that everyone would think, oh, that's wonderful. When they discover that it's not permanent, they get so freaked out, like maybe they get bad news on the stock market. They get so freaked out, they go from the God realm to the hell realm instantly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a sort of psychodynamic experience of reality. Yeah. Sorry, I answered the long question.
So you're telling me that Buddhism has more hells than Christianity? Because this is blowing my mind. I've never heard this ever.
I'm just saying, in fact, there's cold hells and hot hells.
Oh, we have those. Yeah.
Not 12 of them, Jesse. We don't have 12.
Okay, we don't, obviously.
Yeah, but the critical thing is that these are developed, these are created by us, and we can exit them, and nothing is permanent. Yeah.
Other questions?
Thank you. I'm kind of curious, if I go way back, like into America, and doctors would go out and, take care of someone. The people would give them what they had. They had extra chickens or whatever it was. The same for me is about religions. It's institutionalized, which therefore has become a business. For all of you, I know you counsel individuals, every one of you. I would venture a guess that those one-on-one times are far more productive and healing than sometimes talking to the masses. I personally think some of you do have churches that are very well regarded in the community as places that good people come and good things happen. But I think there's a lot of religions and a lot of things. So I think we've lost our way, and then you became capitalized. And it's like, what if you weren't capitalized? What would it all look like? And by the way, I agree with you about capitalism. It's driven totally by shame. The whole consumption world was foisted upon us, that we didn't look pretty enough or well enough or whatever. And so I think a lot of the stuff about fear and the need for money comes from that silly premise. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure what the question in the comment
There is
was, but I really liked what you had to say. What I really like throughout, all of our faith traditions, I don't actually know others. Most of our faith traditions, maybe all, have outlived a lot of different ways of organizing society and a lot of different ways of distributing money. We are older than capitalism, right?
It shouldn't be about money.
Right, but I think in every period of Christianity, there have been people who look at what it has done to us and done to our expression of faith to have to accommodate the mold that we find ourselves in.
I disagree.
So there are always people who are starting little revolutions to try to do something differently, whether that's 13th century Italy. And Francis is looking at the way his own family as a wealthy, a wealthy, what's the word? Oligarchs of Italy are controlling an unjust economy. And his solution to it was to strip naked in a courtroom and give his dad back everything his dad ever paid for and start something new. And I think we always have this route. I think the route you're identifying is real, and I think every era has had it, and this is ours.
I think that the thing that you're talking about when it's formed into the shape of money, thank you, you're thinking that's what has to be given back or be taken. And my point is, we are a lot deeper than that, much, much deeper than that. And money is only like an ornament. And it's like, so the whole idea of money, and therefore the whole idea of capitalism, any system that we have is basic at the fault. You need community. And that's one of the things you get, sometimes through churches, sometimes through different things, but I don't think you get it through money. I've never found that.
Abby.
Hello. Oh gosh, how do I even start this? Okay, so this is from my own experiences with Christians in my life, not necessarily people from your guys' congregation, so, you know.
They can be, it's fine.
You're good.
But I run in some non-religious circles, and then have friends and family who are. And I've noticed that one of many, many reasons that people go to church or join the congregation is for that safety net and that security and that community. But I find that the Christians in my life are terrified to ask for help. And they have so much more shame around it than the non-Christians in my life, which is really fascinating. I have theories about, you know, how certain stories are framed where it's like there's the hero who is the giver, and then there's the receiver who is kind of like down several pegs from the giver. And I wonder if that plays into this issue around the amount of shame, because when you hear these stories, you think, I want to be like Jesus. I don't want to be like the person Jesus just helped. And you guys kind of brought up a few times the idea of like a gift economy, and how that seems to be some type of remedy to this like capitalism issue, this shame issue. And in social justice work that I've done outside of religion, I've found that gift economies cultivating like normalcy around sharing resources and sharing gifts without somebody having to say, I'm suffering, please help me, has been, in my experience, the most effective way to lift people up, because it doesn't require them to have that big, scary, vulnerable moment where they come knocking on your door begging for help. So I'm wondering, what kind of gift economies exist in your church, and how could we expand on what already exists to normalize communities that exist in that way, rather than, oh, if you just apply through this thing, then we will give you the resources, and you know, so on and so forth. Is there a way where the resources can just exist, and then regardless if you're rich, middle class, or poor, like a library, anybody can walk into a library and use those resources?
Sorry, can you move your chair over here really quick?
Yeah. You guys want my card later?
Yeah, the first part of that, I think I relate so much to that, in that, like, in our church faith community, we have lots of people that will help anyone do anything. We have a really hard time saying, I could use some help with this, you know, and I'm not talking about, like, I'm in the same boat, like, I'm the same, like, and I was thinking, when we do that, as you said, we don't really understand what it's about when we can't do that, because it's about this interconnectedness, this reciprocity, the ability for all of us to be vulnerable and to know that we help each other. So I think that's a real challenge that we have in front of us, is to, I got 10, you need something done, we got 100 people are going to help you out. Hey, anybody need something? No, we're good. You know, like, yeah, we're not good. We could use a little help. So the second part, so I think you're dead on the first part. And I think we're trying to learn that, and we're trying to grow into that and learn our way there. The second part of how we do that, I don't know. How do we access those resources in a different way? Good question.
When you guys have your community dinners, that's sort of like a regular thing that happens that anyone can attend,
yes,
regardless of if they're even in your congregation.
Right, yes, for everybody,
Yeah, so that's like an example of like a gift economy.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the ways that you can change that narrative is to destigmatize asking for help. Asking for help should not be something that somebody feels bad about doing. And I know that in Steamboat, especially the city of Olympians, the city where everybody is a champion, it is very hard to admit that you're not the best, that you need help, that there are problems in your life. People just won't do it. They just have a really hard time. I think destigmatizing going through a difficult time and saying, I need somebody to help me, like that should be, I think, the starting point of trying to even everything out. But what we have done is capitalism makes money a moral issue. It makes, if you're rich, you're good. If you're poor, you're bad. And if you don't have it, it's your own fault, and there's shame in that. If you do have it, it's because God loves you and has given you so much more than everybody else. We have to stop that narrative, because that is just not true. And it's also not, at least the Christian faith that I know, that's just not true. I mean, Jesus at the very beginning of the Beatitude says, blessed are the poor. Like, with no qualifications later that come after poor in spirit. It's like, no, blessed are the poor. The poor people are the blessed. So we really have to work hard to change that narrative, I think.
I agree, and I think one of the things that we have to do is that, religious leaders have been some of the ones that propagate that, right? Like, because, we're not supposed to have problems or whatever, if we can get up in front of our community and say, I'm struggling with my kids, or my kid's dealing with addiction and I don't know what to do about it, and like, be vulnerable and open to model that. Because if we're always in the leadership role and we never offer that model, and I think I think in general, Christian leadership has not been good at that, because we're afraid to do that, because we're afraid we won't look successful or be good if we say, we have problems and struggles too, and I think we need to be better at that.
I really like the pragmatism of the how in your question. It's not like, why would we do this? Because you perfectly outlined why we would do it.
Yeah, you clearly want to.
It's like, how? And for me, the main answer is we move away from thinking of our religious institutions as distribution nodes of wealth towards loci for mutual aid networks, where we have the capacity to bring people together on the basis of everyone being a giver and everyone being a receiver. So, for example, this year in our church, we have a long-standing tradition of having like 4 different gift drives, one for local people, one for kids overseas, one for this, one for that. This year, we trashed 3 of the 4. We had one because people didn't want to give it up. They just were not ready to move on from being givers in some capacity. And then we did a gift and toy drive. There was a mutual aid event where everyone came and brought something or nothing, and everyone left with something or nothing. And it wasn't really clear in the event who showed up with a box of toys and who left with a box of toys, because it's such chaos. So I think that's a way that we just need to change the way we operate. That we are not here to reinforce this notion of givers and receivers, but we can organize our communities so that giving and receiving is the thing that we all do.
I love the question, and I don't know the answer. As you could probably guess from what I shared earlier, we do work on a membership model, and we have played with the notion of switching up the model for our congregation over the last few years. And some very brave, in my opinion, Jewish congregations around the country are playing with just scrapping the membership model altogether and just saying, they call it different things, a buildership or a communal way of structuring. And it's essentially like, you're in and pay what you can. However, the risky part of it, obviously, is that you need to have trust in the fact that people actually will contribute. And if I'm being honest, I think part of it is also, yes, encouraging a culture of giving and valuing and encouraging people to ask for help and encouraging others to step in when they can help others. But it's also excuse my language, but calling people out on their shit, and keeping people accountable, because I think it's human nature in a way to take advantage of the things that are, in place and the ask. And so I found recently that some well-meaning, good people are, trying to not pay what they can in order to, skirt around it. And so I think that it's again, it's a matter of like, again and again, showing people like, what is our product? What do you value? How can you place time, treasure, talent behind that? But it's complicated, you know, and it requires a lot of trust, especially on the part of the leaders in order to,
Okay, I think we've got one more an online question.
One question from online.
From online, sure. Can you grab the mic? Fantastic.
Someone's wondering what opinions or reactions are to public benefit corporations.
Like B Corps. I'm guessing these are like B Corps, where like the bottom line is not just about making money, but also about social good and giving back. Like there are some corporations that aspire to do more than just make money.
It's specifically, they have obligations for more than just profit to the stakeholder, and it's in their corporate structure. It's a legal obligation for something great.
Ooh.
I think it's great, I just think it shouldn't be a choice. I think that's the problem with the model, is that corporations only have to do it if they want to do it. I think every corporation should be a B corporation. I think they should be paying attention to the environment, to people, to a lot of other things other than just making money. And I think if they did that, they would actually make more money, because that's been the truth of a lot of corporations that get out in front of these things and show themselves to be good companies. I think like Subaru maybe is one of them possibly, that why do you think so many people buy Subarus? It's not just because they're good cars, they're okay. I know that's a sin to say in Steamboat.
Yeah,
but
you're stepping on a different
listen,
religion.
I different religion, right. I drive a Honda, so it's not the thing. But what I'm saying is that people do look to companies that do good and try to support them. I know I do, and I know there's a lot of people that do. So I think that's my main challenge with it. I think they're great. I just think everybody should have to do it.
Okay, so I think we're just coming to the end of our time here, and I appreciate everyone joining, both online and here in the room. And as always, we want people to take something home with them, and maybe this stimulated some thoughts or some new ideas. And one contemplation that we've been asking, and has come up a few times tonight, is like, what do you put on your altar? So maybe that could be a conversation you have with someone, or just something that you think about yourselves. If you would like to be on our email list, you can sign up. We'll put a sign-up sheet over there on the tea table.
There are some surveys. Feel free to just click on over and add your name to a list.
Great. Okay, yep. You can fill out a survey if you want to give us any feedback. And if you'd like
to
to
survey, there's no need to fill out every question. You can pick and choose your favorite.
Okay. And if you would like to make a donation to Exploring, if you got something